And folks, hello, this is Ralph Fucetola. I welcome you to this test of the LifeSpirit Conversations podcast / live stream. I have on with me this evening, which is, by the way, we're here in June. It's the 26th of June. I'll take a look. Yes, it's the 26th of June. We have to rely on our computers for everything. I have Nancy Orlen Weber and Dick Weber of Lightwing Center. This is an opportunity for the three of us to try out this system. It's YouTube's live stream, and it actually will archive this discussion. We're going to spend just a couple of minutes talking about the idea of creating these conversations, bringing in people, and we all know lots of people who are generally in the holistic or spiritual world, and letting them talk about their paths. Having a conversation about different people's paths. And I think that would be a good way to start. It's strange the way paths cross. A year or so ago, maybe 2 years, maybe 3, who knows by now. We were having dinner together, and we had Dr. Rima Labo and General Bert Stubblevine with us. And it was this great dinner, and then we ended up back at your place. And Rima and you and everyone are talking, and just when it was about time to leave, it turned out that you both realized that you had actually worked together 40 years before in the hospital, which probably was the model for the not so fictional fiction of One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. No,
not at all.
Not at all. Tell us about that part of your journey then.
Sure. And it was a video Rima was showing in which she mentioned the Albert Einstein complex.
Ah, okay.
And I said to her, did you work in the old Lincoln Hospital as a psych resident? She said, yeah. I said, do you remember Dr. Peter Kimmel, Dr. Von Gatzke? She said, of course. I said, they were residents with you, right? Do you remember the blonde psychiatrist? Yeah. So I was the head nurse there. It was a federally funded grant of 10 days stay for acute psychotic episodes that were diagnosed either in the emergency room, police pickup, or court remanded, or coming out of Bronx State for reevaluation, specifically to our unit. We had around the clock a total of 35 of us who were handpicked, and the way we were handpicked is the chief of psychiatrist was the first one hired. He hired the second person, the 2 hired the third, 3 of them hired the 4th,
Wow.
And so on. We threw the I Ching every morning before we began.
Very interesting.
We're in psychodrama, gestalt, nutrition, and we had a closet full of clothing, dishes, everything that we didn't want. We were recycling and giving to the clients if they were capable of going home after the 10-day stay. And we made such miraculous, transformative experiences for ourselves and our clients for us. There was first name, no uniforms.
Nice.
We weren't any resident who came on with a stethoscope. We told them, put your white jacket away and what's your first name? And if they said no, we threw them off the unit.
Was this 71, 72?
Yes.
Yeah, the height of the psychedelic experience for many people.
Yes, yes. And we had detox in the next unit. So sometimes we got people in and I'd go, they're just tripping. They come down on the Thorazine or something and they'll be fine. We tried not to give drugs. We argued with any doctor who recommended drugs except for a serious, imminent, dangerous situation. Mm-hmm. That's the only time we agreed that drugs were absolutely mandatory. And we had magic in 10 days. We wrote acute psychotic episodes again and again. We had people locked up 20 years in Bronx State who in 10 days were fully functional.
Is that because you took them off the sort of drugs that were impinging them, or that you added something to what was happening?
Oh, we added something too. Absolutely. I'll give you if I may, an example.
Please, this is great stuff. Love it.
We had tating intake. So it would be a nurse and a psychiatric resident would do the intake when they came on the unit. There was a woman who was in Bronx State, I don't know how many years, decades. Her history showed that when she was 16, she spit at her mother, and her mother called the police, and they put her in a mental institution. And within the 10 days that she was there as punishment, right, her mother died.
Oh my gosh.
She had a brother of age, an adult brother, 19, 20, something like that. And he refused to take her home. So they kept her there. We got her decades later.
Decade or decades?
Decades, plural.
Oh my gosh.
Right. I think she was there 30 years. So, right. We're sitting in a little alcove, and we had called her brother to please come in for the history. He sits down next to her, and I'm sitting with the psych resident catty corner to them in this little bench-like alcove.
Mm-hmm.
And we're asking her, how do you feel going through this? We're brand new with it. And she kicked him, her brother. And he said, you see that? She's very violent. And I said, well, I think if my brother didn't take me out of a mental institution, I was okay. I had just been at my mother, and my mother died. And then he let me stay there forever. I'd be pretty angry. He was furious. So she kicked him again and looked at us. And the psych resident said, you have every right to be angry. And we both agreed. We said, honey, if you want to punch him, be our guest. So her eyes got wide. And her brother said, how could you talk? We said, you know what? You better leave. You get out of here before we do something we'll regret. Because what you did belongs in jail. She was fine.
Weren't there doctors all along the way that would be inspecting her? She just got lost in the bureaucracy?
It wasn't a voluntary remand.
Right. If you have a mental institution filled with different layers and levels of they're lucky if they see somebody 1 hour a week and then have a group meeting, and mainly maintained on drugs.
And I'm sure every night they set that little Dixie cup with the 3 medications in there.
Yeah, that was the one.
Watch them until they took them.
Yeah.
Right. That most mental hospitals, and pardon me for those who work there and think, it's progressive. Most of I wouldn't work there. I wanted to work in psychiatry. I refused all the jobs until this one. This was a dream come true for me. I could bring in anything I believed would be useful that was more natural.
Now, this is very interesting. This is exactly what the LifeSpirit conversations should be about life histories, about how it led you to where you are. Well, where you are now is you use all sorts of interesting methods to help bring people to into a better place. You moved from sort of a holistic but standard approach to something else as over the decades. Where do you think you ended up, and why?
Where?
I mean, you travel, you teach, you do webinars, you do seminars, you write books.
Stories, but she always had a different perception than most people, right? And after hiding it for years as a child, when she got into psychiatry and found that the physicians, right, well-respected, well-credentialed people, thought that what she did was pretty unique and useful.
They loved it.
Yeah, so she started to use it on the clients.
Before I left Lincoln Hospital, when I said I'm done, I was offered the top research post in the state of New York in psychiatry by the chief of psychiatry of New York State. I knew what I had done was synthesizing. And when I was a little girl, I used to look at leaves and wonder how they connect with me and the universe. I would look at the ants and talk with them and play with them because I wasn't allowed a pet. Right. So I always walked my own path, and I was introverted and didn't have a lot of friends, hardly any. And I had 2 of my best friends growing up died young, as children, separately, a few years apart. So
Yeah.
I was not part of anything other than the universe. We used to
That
write
is the
letters.
shaman's journey, of course, you know.
Right. Exactly. And my address, my return envelope address, one time I can remember writing, it would end with the United States, Western Hemisphere, planet Earth. I think that's my true address.
Interesting. Yeah.
If I knew more, I would have written more, but that would be it. So I've always felt that, by the time I was born, I remember my birth. So
That's astounding, but it is not impossible. Certainly, there are other reports of that.
Sure. Yeah, and because of all of just who and what has happened, I believe in when the student is ready, the teacher appears, whether it's inside or outside. And so I was blessed as I accepted my path and stopped hiding. Sometimes I would kind of hide. I would talk, but I would never know why I would be saying what I said.
Right.
Lincoln Hospital really synthesized everything. They applauded how I could see what the hallucination was, literally. I could walk in and tell them what that hallucination was. I physically saw it. So nobody argued the point. And my background with my family helped a lot. My father was blackballed during the McCarthy era. He won his case. He had high-end security. He worked on rockets.
Why would he be blackballed?
His kid brother, 15 years his junior, was the head of the Communist Party in Brooklyn. Nobody knew it, including my father, because he wasn't close to him. And when it was discovered, my parents got an FBI letter. They showed it to me. I was 12.
Oh.
And for 2.5 years, our lives were radically changed. We had the FBI trailing us everywhere we went. My father was blackballed from his industry until he won his case. He was never the same. His family was so frightened of what was going on, they lied in order to protect the kid brother.
Oh.
So he lost his whole family. We never saw them again. My cousins, 41 years later, because I was on television for something, my cousins saw me and contacted me.
Wow.
41 years later. They didn't know what had happened. Well, I knew what happened. I read the transcripts.
Was he in, did you end up in some sort of a witness protection program, or?
No, it was pretty horrible.
The only people that were being protected from was the federales.
Wow. Oh, yes.
Harassment were
I think
virus.
where I get the politics from, within me, where I stay quiet except when I can do and make a difference.
Got it.
Where I can make a difference, I will, and I believe in that adage. From what I learned there was the right people will come at the right time, if they can, and if they can't, go about your stuff quietly and find a back door to crush the evil empire.
I see. So this led you to the ministry.
Totally. Well, it was something, and it's funny, I never wanted to think of myself as part of anything other than the universe. So I read the New Testament. I was born into a Brooklyn Jewish home, and I had an Orthodox grandmother who I adored, and I didn't know anything about religion. My parents did not teach me. So about 15 or 14, I read the New Testament, and I thought, well, this is good stuff. They're not saying anything bad. And I went to a lot of different churches on my own, every kind. And I went to temples, and I went and I read on Zen, Buddha. I love Buddha. And I thought, well, fascinating. This whole world is just filled with this. And no one has one answer. And the answers are all dialects. I always thought if I was born in China in a rice paddy, I would know who Jesus is. I would know who Buddha is. So what does that make me? Just interested in the universe.
I suspect that if we questioned a lot of the Life Spirit ministers, we'd find out that they all went through that searching period, probably in their teens. I did the same thing. I was reading all sorts of different religious books before they were all available on the internet. You had to actually go to libraries and find them. But of course, yeah. And Dick, did you find yourself in a similar situation, or?
It's interesting because as an early teenager, I went to CYO so I could play basketball.
All right.
My family's background was Episcopalian, and I went to an Episcopal church up the street. One day, I'm about 13 years old, listening to a Reverend Graham, not Billy, talk about salvation, right? And something snapped. I said, no, I've always thought this was mythological, but I can't believe anybody would think that because I wasn't born to knowing the word, right, that I'd be consigned to the heap of eternity. So I said, let me go out and find out where the commonalities are, right? Let me look at all comparative religions, right? And if I get all of the other stuff aside and whatever's left is really the connection. And that's what I've been doing the rest of my life. That's probably why I'm very comfortable. My grandmother was the psychic from the neighborhood. Anybody wanted to know what their baby was going to be, they would come to her. She'd get out her darn needle, right? And she bows, right? And then she would tell them.
I'm telling you, if we search as we go through this Life Spirit conversations in the future, we're going to find out similar stories. Kathy could tell you a similar story, my wife, and certainly my grandmother had certain rituals that she did that I, years later, began to understand better. You know, and just little bits and pieces are coming back to me as I get older, I guess.
Interesting.
But I've written about that in the Life Spirit clearing page. If you go to lifespirit.org, which is our main website, among other things you'll find in that convoluted website is the Life Spirit clearing page, which talks about different clearing techniques and release techniques. And I talk about Grandma White's techniques.
Yeah. But one of the things, as you say that, my Bubby Becky came from New Hampshire once a year to visit us in Brooklyn. I was dating a Muslim. Right. My parents had no say about this. I was a student nurse. I was 17. I lied about my age to him because he was 28. He thought I was 21. He met me as a student nurse. He was chief of cardiology, and he came from Syria. And he was going back.
Nancy, I'm sorry to interrupt, but can you just wiggle your wires? We're getting some sort of weird feedback. Are you plugged into your power supply?
Yeah, I am.
All right.
Yeah, it's coming in from there. Well, this is the joys of live streaming. Now, we haven't told anyone about this particular test, but if we have a live stream link that we would be able to put up on the Facebook page, and otherwise get out to people. We could set the actual timing of this up 24 hours in advance, and we would have that link 24 hours in advance. So as we continue with this live test, if you will, of Life Spirit Conversations, this will be, of course, on the archive. It'll be permanently archived for us, and we'll see. So where do we go? How long should the conversations last?
Permanence is an interesting concept.
I love looking at it. So my grandmother met Gezi, his name. She knew he was Muslim. She was an Orthodox Jew, kept the kosher home. I was 17. She calls me over to the stoop where she's sitting. And he's washing my car. And she said to me, Nancy, I have to tell you. I said, what? She said, if you marry him, I get to live long enough to see that, I will dance at your wedding. If you don't marry him, marry somebody like him. He is wonderful.
Huh.
This is an Orthodox Jew about a Muslim.
Right.
And
she had given up on your branch of the family.
Now,
she was known for this. She was the teacher, I call, of love, of universal love.
What became Gezi Katani?
He is the chief of psychiatry and cardiology in Damascus, Syria.
That is a tough place.
Oh, to Syria. He I know, and I pray for him. He is a good human being. And he had proposed, and I rejected because I knew I lied about everything, and I was 17 and not ready to get married to anybody. I didn't think I'd ever get married. I didn't want to get married. I was not that kind. I really always felt I was very odd.
What year would that be? What year was that? You were 17. Without revealing anything you don't want to reveal.
61? Yeah, 1961. 62. 1962. Something like that.
Yeah, I guess we're both just about the same age, actually.
Yeah.
So I find that the bottom line for me has always been that love is a fabric of the weaving and the connectedness between all the galaxies, all the universe, all the everything. And anything that doesn't keep us in that flow, that connection, is not love. So I don't care what label anybody puts on, they're just labels. It's just the left hemisphere of the brain going, I need to put a name on it. And it's okay. And I respect all of it. And I've always said I'm thrilled to have been a minister at a time where a couple who attended a Catholic church called me and asked me to perform their wedding in their church. And I said, oh, really? She said, well, I'm divorced, he's widowed, and our priest, Father Bob, said you can do it. So I went and performed. Right, I couldn't do communion, but I did everything else. And he was an angel. It was so sweet. And I'm going, now how many women can say, I'm born Jewish, honor all that I've been taught, and go in the name of the Father and the Spirit, the Son, I bless you, I wed you, etc. I loved it. I thought, this is great, because it doesn't matter what anybody else believes as long as I respect it.
That's right.
And I think it's pretty much anything.
That is the life spirit.
That's the Tai Chi of life spirit, I call it. It's like the Tai Chi master, when you can come at them and they just take that energy and move it away from them.
I have to say, weddings are one of the times in my ministry that I really enjoy the ministry the most. It's one of the best. Yeah, one of the best. But these are really good. I'm really glad that you both agreed to be on here for this little discussion, which will start off our archive, a little bit about how you came into the ministry. You've been in the ministry for a number of years now, and you have a very decent sized group of people who communicate with you and work with you. It's quite wonderful, and we ought to get some of them have really interesting stories. We ought to get them on as well.
Very fascinating.
But I don't want to cut this short or anything, because I'm sure we did a lot more from the period we've gotten to in the discussion, which is basically 30 years ago or 40 years ago, and where we are right now. much happened between the 1960s and the 70s, and we're now more than halfway through the second decade of the new millennium. Wasn't it just 1999? What happened?
So yeah.
I think the changes are outer changes, if you will, the technology, etc.
Oh yeah.
However, they're always, for me, a parallel universe to what is going on internally, both in a personal level and a connectedness in all life. So the expression out here is really a culmination of many, many factors, and we've all seen it moving in that direction.
I think a lot was set in motion by World War II and the aftermath. That's what really began to change American culture, because of what women did in the war, and it was really our parents, that greatest generation that's passing so rapidly right now.
And then you throw in other parameters, and you really don't know. It's like everything else. It takes many different factors, and the one factor we can point to. So Mother Jones did an expose in the 70s on the advent of the exclusion of all natural product teaching in medical schools for a deal they made with the pharmaceutical industry.
Right.
Right? To
They make
expand
those deals all the time, apparently, you know. But we know that conscience cannot be restricted. We know that we have a fundamental human right to informed consent, and legislators have no business interfering with that. And I'm sure that struggle for freedom will continue, and no one is going to be giving up on it. That's for sure.
I also think the reason it could even occur back then and the deal be struck is because of the basic problems of groups of. For me, it goes back to K days, where matriarchal societies were groups headed by groups of women, and then suddenly you see Kate painting all about patriarch, one head,
Right.
male.
It's interesting that the matriarchal view did survive in different places and ways. For example, the Iroquois nation, the Great Confederacy, the women were actually chose the men who ran the federation. The reality is, at least when I noticed how my big Italian family operated, even back in the 1950s, the women really ran everything, you know, domestically anyway.
Right. And I think that there has been this need, and I think of biology and all the ramifications of why we get that, and we're dealing with it now. But I think 1,000 years ago, people had conversations like this too about it. They just didn't have the technology.
Yes, exactly.
We took a big step toward complete human freedom today. Have you read Kennedy's decision? Kennedy.
No, I haven't read it yet. But certainly, you know, marriage should be a private contract among consenting adults. You know, now I wonder how they're going to rationalize, or did they? I want to really read the case, because it'd be interesting to see if they talk about the case that they decided 100 years ago or so, saying that polygamy could be outlawed. How do they get around that? Why is polygamy outlawed and same-sex marriage not? Why wouldn't group marriage be allowed? Do you remember the Heinlein novel, The Moon is a Harsh Mistress? On the moon, in this near future, there are a whole bunch of different types of spousal relationships going on. And maybe more creativity can happen.
It seems to be emasculating more and more men. Eventually, you may have to have polygamy, because we don't have enough freedoms.
Or polydrony, anyway.
Okay, polyandry.
Well, polyandry, that's the word.
Okay, we're reduced to a very funny conversation.
It's obviously the end of the program. You know, we're not going to explore the past 15 or 20 years, because we're probably still in the middle of it. And trust, I'm still assimilating what happened in the 1960s and 70s. Actually, I've been thinking a lot about the various people I knew who are not around. The amazing characters like Ginsberg and Leary and of course Bob Wilson and those people and others. So this has been a winter of passings for my family anyway. Quite a few people passing on, and most of them in their mid-90s, but a few a bit younger. So that is also part of the process that we're going through.
Sure, and it's also a cause of reflection. Every time somebody leaves this earth, it wakes us up a little bit more too. Remember, we're mortal.
Right.
Remember, we're mortal.
When the Pope is carried in on the chair for his coronation, someone supposedly says to him, remember you are mortal, several times as they go along. And that is a tradition, by the way, that was supposedly started in Rome during the triumphs. Whoever was being triumphed through on his chariot would have a person behind him holding a golden laurel wreath above his head, saying, "Remember, thou art mortal." on the way down the aisle, I guess.
So, and it is proof that even back then, people forget. People forget we're mortal.
But guess what? We're also immortal.
Well,
corporal form is mortal.
Corporal form is mortal.
Right. I agree. His body will go through the digestive process of all physical bodies and return to Earth. There's no question about that. That is one of the great noble truths.
Some innovation, and eventually there will be immortality, but it will be machine-based. They will take all our consciousness. Right?
And that eventuality might be really soon. My son promises to upload me. He says that it'll happen before it'll happen. You know, I've got another 25 years. It'll definitely happen. So I'm, that's why we have our ministry to AI. I figure we'll get in on it right away.
Don't let your son do the uploading because he's going to edit some things.
He may edit. That's true.
Don't you think that what everything is about, at least, it is really creating a legacy for other generations?
That's certainly one of the things that gives us the strength to go on in the face of mortality. That's for sure. Yeah, I wouldn't mind leaving a recording of myself in the internet of our one mind, because I think the coming of the internet literally and very physically changes the nature of human culture. Physically we're still the Cro-Magnons we've always been, but this is what's happened is astounding. That's why I wrote that long piece about the new millennium that I published back at the beginning of it, talking about just how these changes are we are a communicating species, and certainly a ministry is about communication. And all of a sudden, all the rules of communication have changed and are rapidly changing.
Yeah.
I just spent the past 6 years or so learning how to do mass emailings to communicate with people. And mass emailings are becoming irrelevant. It's push notices to smartphones.
Yeah.
And so, folks, we're gonna get a LifeSpirit app together. We will have a LifeSpirit app, but in the meantime, you can go to your app store, folks, and search for Health Freedom as one word, and you'll get the Health Freedom app, which is run by Natural Solutions Foundation, of which I'm a vice president, and with the cooperation of the Institute for Health Research, of which I'm the president. And by the way, Dr. Rima and I got our joint paper on CBDs and THC published on SSRN, the social, now I'm not remembering what the four initials stand for. Social Sciences Research Network, which is really nice. It's an open source network that's run by 4 universities. I came across it because a couple of people I know, Professor Mario Rizzo and a couple of others, have recently published there some scholarly articles. And so we've done it. It's really nice. It's very nicely done. And Dr. Rima is trying to, how can we add her to the call? It'll be really fun to add her. We'll be surprised, Dr. Rima, and we'll see if I can actually add her. I don't know how I'm going to be able to do that. No.
People can't add people, huh?
Yeah, I don't know how. Did I start this call or not?
Skype.
I'm sorry?
You're based in Skype. You're on your Skype screen?
I am. Oh, I'm looking at this other screen. We'll get around this way. Hi, Dr. Rima. I've got Nancy and Dick on, and we're actually doing another one of our tests. This is an actual, if you will, dress rehearsal. We all have clothes on at least. And we welcome you to the tail end of this particular episode of LifeSpirit Conversations, in which we learned a lot more about the goings-on at the hospital that you worked with Nancy in a number of decades ago. So you may want to review this video at some point. And we've had a really nice discussion of the roads we've traveled on to get to where we are. And I was just talking about, just this moment, I was talking about the paper that you and I just got published on SSRN. So at that moment, you began to call in. I'm really happy to have your voice on this broadcast.
I have to go to a quieter place. Just this moment, you were talking about what?
The paper we just had published. The CD. Yeah, I can't do that. I'm going to try to make sure we can pick up.
I think that could be very important. What did you think of the show?
Oh, that's the other thing. In the case anyone ever watches this video, got to go to the archive for our radio program. You go to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Natural Solutions. Go to the radio programs there. The one with Dr. Tenpenny is extraordinary. Rima and Sherry Tenpenny spent 2 hours talking about everything we all want to hear about and announcing that they're starting a new radio program on Wednesdays. It'll be in our 5 to 7 slot on Veterans Truth Network, and it's going to be called Case Consult Radio. The two of them together will actually take a history from someone and talk about the alternatives and possibilities. I think it's going to be fascinating radio.
Rima,
I think
that's great.
And of course, we're going to want to have guests on who are themselves people with healing experience. So, it'll be a lot of fun. It's going to be Wednesdays from 5 to 7.
yes, Wednesdays exactly. We went to a restaurant because we forgot to lay in any food for this evening, and I wanted to know what you thought of the show, because basically she and I did this whole thing, and you could get a word in edgewise.
I didn't expect to, actually, but that's okay. It was fascinating, and again, it's available. Well, it's available as an archive on Veterans Truth Radio Network, which is VTNradio.com, and we're going to have it as a podcast archive as soon as I have about 3 hours to actually do that on our YouTube channel, which is what we've been doing. Now, the nice thing, Dr. Rima, about the YouTube live stream that Dick and Nancy and I have just been doing for the past almost an hour, or at least 40 minutes, has been that it's being automatically recorded by YouTube, and it will be posted as a YouTube.
Go ahead.
Oh, that it gets really loud when they celebrate, doesn't it? So we're going to be seeing how this method works. How many people could watch it live? I don't know. We're going to find out. All right, so folks, I'm going to end the broadcast, I guess, unless any of you want to say something that you want on a permanent record somewhere, or else we'll just say thanks to everyone for being part of the experiment. This is going to actually be an archive experiment. We're going to make this public.
Well, I'm glad I caught you all. Hello, Dick. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Ralph. I think that you three are an extraordinary repository of wisdom, and I can't wait to hear your archive version of your wisdom.
Okay. Talk to you later, Dr. Rima. Bye-bye.
Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right. Wow. That was a surprise call-in guest. This is going to be great. I'm looking forward to doing this.
Yes, look at it. All the things going to work out. We worked out.
That potential Case Consult,
go to caseconsultradio.com. Caseconsultradio.com. It has the whole story there. I think it's a great concept. Some good things happening. Oh, we have some other things in the pipeline. Oh boy. All right. This is going to be the end of this discussion. Stop broadcasting. Thank you, everyone. Blessings to all.